here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for another Monday This and That video where I talk about all kinds of different topics, sometimes answering questions or just giving you updates on various things I've got going on around here. It's just a way to keep you a little more informed of what's most currently going on, since most of the videos other than my lives that you see through the rest of the week were shot anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time, and if they're Patrick's videos, they could have been a couple of months or so, because yeah, it takes a while sometimes to get to his videos. So anyway, let's get to the topics of today, and I wanted to start off with something that I actually don't have a physical visual to show you, but I have plenty of photos. Because for those who do celebrate Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, last year I did a video on flatbreads, but it's not even just for those who do celebrate that, but people who just want some good recipes of something that is a quick, easy bread to make when trying to depend on a yeast bread or a sourdough is just, you don't have the time for that, and flatbreads can definitely have their place in your day-to-day lives. And tortillas are one of those. I came up with a couple of different recipes, and I do have them typed up in the description box below that video. But my favorite one that I came up with was my cracker bread. Just like you'll see in this short right here. Love that. I can hardly wait to start making it. It's one of those I just reserve for that time of the year so that we appreciate it a lot more. But the cracker bread is really good. It's nice, crispy, kind of something you can use with dip or whatever. But then I have a softer recipe that could be good for using for sandwiches and more. And then you have things like pot pies that you don't have to worry about yeast or any kind of leaven in those, because you don't use leaven in pie crust. So that's another great idea. But anyway, I just wanted to put that out there for those who may want to check out that video from last year and get a few ideas. Again, even if you don't celebrate the feast, you may still like some of the recipe ideas in there. And the reasons why I put that video out, which is more than just about keeping the feast. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about, again, I don't have a visual right in front of me, but I've talked about buttermilk powder and various things. And someone even asked me, how come you don't ferment your own buttermilk? Well, because I don't want to. Sometimes people think just because you do a lot of things from scratch that you must do everything from scratch, or you should do everything from scratch. No, you don't have to. You got to pick and choose what's best for you. And I don't like to keep a bunch of buttermilk on hand other than in the form of a buttermilk powder, which I'll use from time to time, but that's not actually my favorite thing to do. My favorite thing to do is something I've probably been doing for probably at least 30 years, and that is taking milk, like if I want to make buttermilk biscuits or buttermilk pancakes or something like that, I just take the amount of milk that I'm going to need for that recipe and then add some lemon juice or homemade vinegar to it and let it clabber for a few minutes. That's all I do, and it works great. That is my favorite buttermilk replacement, because basically it's just a quick way to make buttermilk, and you only have to make what you need at a time. Another good option that I was doing for a while was when I was really big into making the milk kefir, which I have a video on that I'll link to down below. I think I talked about the many uses of it, because that also works really good as a buttermilk replacement in your various recipes, even in making your ranch dressing. I just got out of the habit of doing it because it was one of those things I got burned out on. I didn't like it that much. I don't like to drink milk. I don't really care to drink milk kefir. So I wasn't going through it fast enough and decided, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my old way of doing things when it comes to needing a buttermilk. So it's really as simple as that. So basically what you're looking at is about 1 tablespoon of your acid, be it lemon juice or vinegar. It can be any vinegar, but if you're already making homemade vinegar, just use that, to every cup of milk. So it's super easy. You just mix it in there and let it sit. I usually let it sit for about 15 minutes or so. So I'll do that first and let it sit while I'm doing my other preparations for whatever it is I'm making. Then another fun thing that I thought of. It actually, I shouldn't say I thought of. I remember somebody said this, it was a while ago, in comments, where it was probably on the video I did on the benefits and uses for citrus peels, which I'll go ahead and link to that video down below as well. But I just remembered it again recently as I'm trying to cycle through a lot of the citrus peels I put up over the years. Sometimes I'll go through them rather quickly, and other times they can start building up, and I end up with some that are several years old. So I decided it was time to, since I've got more new citrus peels coming in, and again, as I've said before, our favorite types of citrus to consume are any of your smaller, thin-skinned type citrus, orange type citruses, such as mandarins, tangerines, and so on. And that way I don't have to worry about a thick pith that can give a bitter flavor. I don't try to remove the pith. I just use as is. But anyway, I went back and found some older jars of citrus peels that were still sitting there, because I'll a lot of times use those for making vinegar, but I don't need those for vinegar. I actually need more space for storing fresher peels. So what I did was I took the peels and dumped them into my little basket where I keep fire starters that Patrick makes, which is sitting next to my wood stove. And I just dumped the citrus peels in there because guess what? Because of the oils in the citrus peels, they make a great fire starter. They're nice and dry because they've been dehydrated, and then they've got those oils and they just take right off. So, and they smell good. So a really great idea for fire starters, even if it's something you just want to throw in your go bag to have something to help get your fires going. So yeah, if you end up with a plethora of dried citrus peels and you're not working through them fast enough, there you go. Now let me talk about the winemaking progress. So last this and that video, I shot it just earlier in the day before I got this batch here going. So this is made from all homegrown fruits, mostly my grapes and blueberries and currants, all that I had in the freezer, because I'm like, okay, I've got space to store some more wine. I need to get more fruits out of the freezer, because as we start getting into this next season and we have berries and grapes and more coming in, I'm going to need more space in my freezer again. So it was time to get some more going. Now I want to show you a clip of what it looked like right after I started it. You're going to see it looks much darker than it does right here. And that's really common. You'll see the same thing when you're making like a green grape wine. It can start out looking sort of almost an olive green. It's kind of dark and kind of ugly. And in a few days, it will lighten up and turn a pale yellow. But when it hits about the 1 week mark, which is where this is, you'll see the color start to reverse and go back to a darker color. But it will be, if you're talking about the grapes, it'll end up being a much prettier color than it started out with that kind of olive green. But anyway, I suspect this is actually already past the point where it's hit its lightest color, and it's already starting to turn back into a darker color. So it should be pretty close to the color it started out with. So I wanted to share that, because if you're getting new into winemaking and you go to make your wine, especially if you're using green grapes and you're like, wow, that's ugly. What? You just hang on. It'll get prettier as it goes along. And if you're doing something where you have red fruits like I used here, or even the rhubarb, it'll turn very, very pale. Like the rhubarb especially turns like a baby pink. Then it goes back to a much darker color once it's finished. And it's actually quite beautiful. So just something you should know, but also know that I did shoot that all-in-one video, and I got it to about right at 20 minutes, where I talk about the whole process of making wine. So be watching for that down the road, because it's going to be a little more simplified than the 4-part that I did several years ago. And the reason I did it that way was because I was shooting each video section through the month-long process of making the wine. It's not that it's hard, it's just that there's a few different steps I take, but I've also changed a little bit since then too. Because for example, like I added the sugar, that other cup of sugar, around 1 to 2 weeks in. I don't wait that long anymore. I just wait until it's very active and bubbly, which could be somewhere between 3 to 5 days. And then I add my 3rd cup of sugar. But anyway, yeah, so some things have changed. If you're new to winemaking, you want to get into it, you can go watch my winemaking series, which I'll link to down below, but you may also want to wait until you see that all-in-one video, since I have made a couple of changes since the original series. And there's something else I wanted to touch on that I didn't think to say in one of my recent live shows. It's on my second channel, Rain Country Live. I was talking about grains and milling and storage and more. And one of the things I forgot to say, which I try to remember to say whenever I'm talking about especially expensive equipment, such as my personal grain mill, don't forget to look for such things secondhand. Facebook Market, if you have Facebook, is one of the best places to look because you can set your distance of how close that item is to you. So when you're talking about heavy items especially, you're going to want to start with the, within your own town if you can, and then expand out from there to find what you're looking for. Well, later that day, Patrick, out of curiosity, because he heard me talk about how expensive my grain mill is now, because I paid around $400 for it when I bought it back in, I think, 2013. And now it's close to $800. But he found one that was brand new, never even been used, that somebody was selling for $500. And it's possible you could find one that's been used for even less than that, because the country living grain mills are made, they're built like a tank. They're made quite well. But again, as I said in that live, there's more grain mills out there than just mine. I can only share my experience with the one I have, because I've never used any other type of grain mill. So again, don't forget, if you're looking for a good dehydrator, grain mills, canners, always start, especially if your budget's tight, start looking secondhand and be patient. Sometimes it can take a while before something that exactly what you're looking for shows up. But I've had so many followers tell me they got this Excalibur, or they even got this freeze dryer, or they got this, or they got that, for a really good deal secondhand. So, and I even have the story I've shared multiple times about finding two. One I don't think was used at all, and the other one maybe was used once or twice. All American canners for $5 a piece. We ended up paying them $10 a piece just out of gratitude for them having that. Now I already have my big All American canner, but when we saw those, I had to grab them because I knew maybe my daughter-in-law might want one of them. And then the smallest one I thought would be great to keep on hand for when I'm just wanting to can a small batch of something, especially if I'm just trying something out for the first time. I want to make sure I'm going to like it before I do, 36 pint jars of something and then find out I really don't like it. So yeah, I mean, you just keep watching for those kind of things, because it can happen if you just know where to look. Now, speaking of canners, I recently had a question come in on email where somebody caught a screenshot where that looks just like this. It's this image right here of my canner, and this person thought that I had my canner sitting down inside of another like stainless steel pot. And no, actually that's not the case. What that is, and I do explain it in the video where I talk about how I, what I use to can and how I do it out on propane. Well, because I'm doing it outside on a propane burner, and sometimes it can get kind of windy, Patrick made this metal sheath. I don't know what it is. I don't know what kind of metal it is. I think it's tin. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's thin metal that he had on hand, and basically just made a little sleeve that goes around. I can set that canner down inside there, but it's open on the bottom. So what that does is it helps make a windbreak that makes it less likely for the flame to get down below the pot to get blown out, but also it helps retain more of that heat from the flame so that I can turn the burner down a lot lower to keep that pressure. Thus, I'm saving fuel. So it's a really great thing that he did with some stuff he had on hand, didn't cost any extra money, and it saves us money when it goes to canning. I'm still canning the items for the same amount of time, but I don't have to have the burner turned up as far because it just makes it more economical. And then one more thing I wanted to mention that I haven't talked about in a while was somebody brought up in another one of my lives where I was talking about, you know, finding 100% cotton shirts sometimes can be really hard. T-shirts like this one right here. And sometimes I bought T-shirts, and even though I had 100% cotton in my search criteria, and I saw the perfect shirt, it was the right color, it had this, the perfect picture. I get it, I start wearing it, and then I realize there's something wrong with the shirt. It does not feel like 100% cotton. And then I go look at the tag and realize I didn't read the description close enough, and it wasn't 100% cotton. So then somebody brought up, well, All American Clothing Company sells 100% cotton shirts, and they do. When it comes to certain, like the basic solid colors, yes, we buy our shirts from there. I have shirts for myself I've bought from there, and I bought a bunch for Patrick from there. They have a good deal, all American made, great colors, and 100% cotton, but now they're also selling shirts that are not 100% cotton. A lot of them are a 50-50 blend. So if you go there, which I'll link to, I'll put the link down below. If you go there, make sure you check, because they have different types. Usually some of their brighter, more unique colors are not 100% cotton. So yeah, anyway, but yeah, they're great. I've been buying from them for probably, it was well over 15 years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but they're a great company, and I highly recommend them. And especially for their t-shirts, they have a really great price for t-shirts, 100% cotton, made in the US. Now, when it comes to jeans, you're going to be paying a lot more, but yes, all the clothing that they sell is all made in the US. And you're just going to typically have to expect to pay more. It's always that way, but that's why it surprises me with their t-shirts how inexpensive they are, because I've seen Chinese made t-shirts for more money than what All American sells them. So anyway, that's my this and that for the week. I hope you enjoyed it. Any thoughts, ideas you'd like to share, please put those in comments down below. And thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.